Welcome to another brand new series here on the Kowabana channel. In this series, we're going to be highlighting various ghosts, creatures, monsters, yokai, etc. from Japanese urban legends and creepypastas. I'd like to keep the focus particularly on ones you may never have heard of, but I've no doubt we'll see some of the more popular ones along the way as well. To kick this series off, we're going to be looking at a creature that is said to exist in the Goto Islands, just off the coast of Nagasaki. Although, whether it's a creature or creatures is a little difficult to say. You'll see why. This creature, known as Daggakodon, comes to us via a Ni channel post shared on May 25th, 2006. In this particular creepypasta, the poster shares a story of how the year before, 2005, was apparently a terribly unlucky year for them. Failure after failure at work left them wondering why they were having such a bad time when, astrologically speaking, the following year was supposed to be a bad one for them. It's at this point they learn of something called a Mayayaku, which is a term used to describe a year before an inauspicious year. Well, that settles it. Time to hit up a shrine for some good old-fashioned cleansing to get rid of all these bad vibes hanging around. The poster takes a long weekend and returns to their family home on the Goto Islands. There, they visit the Nanatake Shrine, so called because it's believed that a lord and 7 of his retainers died and were enshrined there during the Genpei War. The poster undergoes a cleansing ritual and receives an O-Nusa, which is a wooden wand decorated with white paper streamers that is used for purification purposes. It's that night, after returning home, that the creature of this week's video comes into play. The poster claims that around 3 AM, as they're lying in bed, sweating from the hot summer heat and the for some reason winter blanket his family has given him, he hears a sound. At first, it sounds somewhat like a cat, but as it gets closer, he realizes that it's human. Someone, or rather, several someones, seem to be talking nearby. He's at home alone with his grandfather, aunt, and father, and yet the voices sound distinctly childlike. There are no children in the house. Who or what could this be? The voices stop in front of his bedroom door, and then it opens without a sound. 2 young boys step in, roughly in the 6 to 8-year-old range, and start poking around his room. After a few moments, one of these children looks at the poster and remarks, "Ah, this person is awake." The 2 boys, who look like twins, briefly share a conversation about what they should do with the poster. Should they take this person with them? But when they spot the O-Nusa from Nanatake Shrine, they decide against it. They'll be punished if they try anything. And then, just like that, the twins disappear through the wall, like ghosts. The next day, the poster discovers that these children were something called Daggakodon. It's a legend passed down by the locals, and it's said that if a group of children are playing together, they might suddenly find that there's one extra child there that nobody knows. If that's the case, you absolutely mustn't show that you don't know who this mystery child is. The only course of action is to simply disperse and go home. But what happens if you do suddenly question this mystery child, this Daggakodon, who shows up to play? Well, they will apparently kill you and force you to play with them forever. You're never able to go home again. According to the poster's father, he actually ran into one of these creatures when he was a child, although he was able to safely escape and return home. At this, the aunt poses an interesting question. Isn't the Daggakodon supposed to be a single creature that looks like a child? But the poster saw 2 who looked exactly the same, just like twins. To this, the grandfather has a horrifying response. Who on earth ever said there's just one? There are as many Daggakodon as there are dead children. Yes, as it turns out, this creature, or rather creatures, are pretty much children from the area who have passed on and now become yokai. Unable to move on for whatever reason, they linger on the island and join living children in their games. If one of these kids happens to notice the Dagga Kodon and questions them on their existence, well, it's game over. They'll join them on the other side forever. The easiest way of dealing with these creatures, as mentioned in the story, is to simply stop playing whatever game it is and then go home. However, should you be unlucky enough for one or perhaps several to show up in your house, then having an item of protection from the local shrine works in a pinch as well, as the creatures appear to be afraid of the local Kami-sama's divine powers. Do these creatures exist outside of the Goto Islands? Considering how localized they are and how they fear the Kami-sama that resides there in particular, probably not. But if a mystery kid ever shows up to play games with you or your kids, well, probably best to keep in mind that questioning someone on their existence might not always end well. It's also possible these are a local version, or variant perhaps, of the Zashiki Warashi, yokai from the Tohoku region, Iwate in particular, that look like children and hang around people's houses. They're generally little mischief makers who love pranks and playing with living children, and in some accounts, only children can see them. Some stories tell of adults being horribly confused when counting the household children, only to find there's an extra one there, but they have no idea who this extra child is. There are as many versions of Zashiki Warashi as there are days in the year, but it's possible that the Dagga Kodon are, at the very least, inspired by their northeastern counterparts. The main difference, of course, being that Zashiki Warashi are more akin to Kami-sama and even guardians, while Dagga Kodon are children who passed before their time and fear the local Kami-sama. And that is the story behind the Dagga Kodon, a yokai said to inhabit the Goto Islands off the coast of Nagasaki. Do you have any similar stories or legends where you live? Are there any other types of ghosts or creatures you'd like to see in this series? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you again next time. The creature we're going to be taking a look at this week is known as Zakuro, and you can apparently find it on Mount Kumotori. Mount Kumotori is rather famous, as it stands right on the boundary of Tokyo, Saitama, and Yamanashi prefectures, and at a height of over 2,000 meters, it marks the highest point in Tokyo. It's visited by thousands of hikers each year, and if you reach the top in good weather, you'll also be blessed with a splendid view of Mount Fuji as well. But enough about the mountain itself. What about Zakuro, the creature that's said to inhabit it? What exactly is it? What does it do, and how can you avoid it? Well, this one comes to us from another internet story posted in 2017. According to the story, the poster visited Mount Kumotori with two friends. The plan was to spend the night on the mountain before returning home the following day. They visited the mountain in mid-March, so it was still rather snowy and the conditions, well, not very favourable. The trio stopped at a store at the foot of the mountain to stock up on supplies, but while there, the old woman working behind the register gave the poster a strange warning. You will likely see someone descending the mountain with their hat pulled down low. This person will say hello to you, but you absolutely mustn't, I repeat, mustn't say hello back. Naturally, the poster found this incredibly odd, even more so because she didn't give this warning to anyone else, only him. He would pass a person with their hat pulled down who would say hello, but he wasn't allowed to say hello back. Why? What did it all mean? And how did the old lady know this would happen? Strange. Very strange. At any rate, they started their climb, and as they neared the summit, they stopped to take a break. Suddenly, it was like everything fell silent. The wind seemed to stop. The birds stopped chirping. It was like they were caught in a vacuum where all sound simply ceased to be. It was then that the poster noticed someone was coming down the mountain towards them, and this was accompanied by a loud ringing in his ears and a strange, rusty iron smell in the air. It was impossible to tell if this person was a man or a woman, as they wore a straw hat that was pulled down over their face, as well as robes that resembled that of Thai monks. As this person descended towards them, they seemed to drag their right leg behind them as well. But that wasn't the only strange thing. In this complete absence of noise, the poster realized that the footsteps coming off this person were also strange. Instead of the crunching of snow beneath boots, each step this person took sounded like something was being squished beneath them, like they were stepping on something soft and wet, not hard and crunchy. Then it got even stranger. The poster's two friends didn't seem to notice this person. Only he did. And as the figure got closer, his ears filled with the sound of white noise and something like a monk chanting. Then, when this figure finally reached him, they said only one thing: "Hello." It was just like the old woman at the store said. Although he could not see the figure's face, he sensed they were looking directly at him. Blood dripped from their ears beneath the hat, and they appeared to be having trouble breathing, as it came out sounding much like someone snoring. Either way, he avoided returning the greeting, as the old woman had told him, and, before long, the figure passed. Perhaps not so much that they continued on their way, but just they were no longer there anymore. And throughout this whole ordeal, his friends never noticed anything. They did, however, notice the strange, slightly terrified look on his face, so they decided to continue on their way. When they safely reached the hut near the summit, they were greeted by a rather happy woman claiming to be the caretaker. "Thank goodness," she said, and claimed that the old woman had phoned her and told her everything. She explained to the man that the figure he had seen was called Zakuro by locals and other climbers, but nobody was sure exactly what it was. A spirit? A yokai? Something else entirely? Nobody knew, but either way, whenever this Zakuro creature greeted someone and they greeted them back, the climber would always die in an accident. Numerous people had died by slipping and falling to their death over the years, and it was said they were lured by the Zakuro to their untimely ends. By not saying anything, the poster saved his own life. But why does this creature have the name Zakuro? Well, according to the poster, that name seems fairly obvious. Zakuro is Japanese for pomegranate. When the bodies of those who interacted with the Zakuro were found, well, to put it in the nicest way possible, they weren't in good shape. Falling down a mountain left them in quite a horrific condition, and if you know what a pomegranate looks like when open, well, you can imagine the rest for yourself. There are numerous questions left unanswered by the story, however. First and foremost, what exactly is the Zakuro? We're never told, and it's left up to the reader to guess for themselves. We're told that they wear a straw hat pulled down deep over their face, as well as robes that resemble a Thai monk. They also walk with a limp, and there was blood coming out of their ears and a strange sound coming from them that sounded like snoring. The Zakuro's appearance was also accompanied by a ringing in the ears and the smell of rusty iron in the air. It's clear that the creature isn't of this world, but what exactly they are remains a mystery. Considering the creature can be found on a mountain, and they specifically target climbers, it may be easiest to classify them as a mountain yokai. But where they came from and why they lure people to their death remains unknown. It's also never explained how the old woman at the foot of the mountain knew that the poster would encounter the Zakuro. The figure is clearly known by locals and even many climbers, but it would seem that this old woman had a way of telling who specifically would encounter it. Maybe it was a sixth sense, or maybe some other skill she developed over the years, but either way, her warning saved the man's life. And the creature is so well known that she even phoned the manager of the hut near the summit to warn her that a climber that day was going to encounter it, and to keep an eye out for him. The Zakuro appears to be unique to Mount Kumotori, and it's possible that it was once a monk who died there long ago by falling to their death, and now they linger, luring others to the same fate. Their appearance is somewhat interesting, however, as the Zakuro is described as looking like a Thai monk, rather than, for example, a Yamabushi, the Japanese monks who used to live in the mountains. Either way, why they continue to lure other climbers is a mystery, but thankfully, they can be dealt with rather easily. If you are somehow chosen and you see the Zakuro on your climb up, all you have to do is ignore it. That's it. The experience may be terrifying, yes, but as long as you don't greet it back, then it will pass and all will be well. And that is the tale of the Zakuro, a terrifying creature you can find hanging around the summit of Mount Kumotori. If you're ever unlucky enough to run into them, the key is simply to ignore them, and the danger will pass. But what do you guys think of this one? Do you have any similar stories from your own countries? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you again next time. The creature we're looking at this week is a rather interesting one, as it's rather famous all over the country, and yet nobody is quite sure of where it came from. This fascinating fellow is called Tonkaraton, and the story behind him is actually quite simple. As the story goes, Tonkaraton is a strange creature who resembles a human covered in bandages. Somewhat like a mummy, you might say. But the difference here is that this creature rides around on a bicycle and carries a Japanese sword. He rides around town in this getup, singing Ton, Ton, Tonkaraton. And if he runs into someone, he stops and turns to them. Say Tonkaraton, he says. And that's it. Simple, right? If you follow his orders and say Tonkaraton, as instructed, then the creature is happy and satisfied, and then he leaves. However, if you choose not to answer him at all, or if you recognize him and try to answer before he tells you to, then you probably know what's waiting for you. That's right, he takes out his sword and slashes you all over your body, leaving you to be covered in bandages just like him. And then, it's said, you become the next Tonkaraton, doomed to repeat the cycle by riding around town on a bike covered in bandages and asking people to say Tonkaraton. Whether only one creature of this kind can exist at once, or whether there are numerous Tonkaratons lurking on bikes all over Japan, remains a mystery. According to some versions of the tale, there can only be one, and once someone takes over, they become the new version. What happens to the old one is also unknown, but they presumably are able to move on to the other side, much like the Shichinin Misaki, who must replace one of their numbers before another is allowed to move on. But there are also versions where numerous Tonkaraton exist, and adding a new member simply grows their numbers. Still, considering how easy it is to avoid becoming one, it's hard to imagine there are many of them out there if that's the case. Literally, all you have to do is say Tonkaraton when he asks you to, and that's it. The yokai is satisfied and off he goes, singing his happy tune until he runs into someone else. Ton, ton, Tonkaraton. The creature first reached public attention in the 1990s, thanks to its appearance on the anime Gakkou no Kowai Uwasa, Hanako-san ga kita. As you can see from the image, he's straight up a mummy, riding a bike holding a sword. A schoolboy in the story runs into him on the street one day, and the creature tells him to say Tonkaraton. Nervously, he does so, and the creature disappears. But nobody will believe his story, so the boy sets out to get proof. He heads to the same spot at the same time the next day with a camera, and screams for Tonkaraton to appear. And so he does. But he cuts the boy down in an instant. Pained and confused, the boy asks him why, and he says that, "You mustn't say Tonkaraton until I tell you to. Anyone who says it before then is my enemy." He then rides off into the distance, and as the boy fears that he's going to die in the gutter, he suddenly finds himself covered in bandages. Yes, he has become one as well, and now their numbers are increasing. There might even be some Tonkaraton in your town as well. For numerous children who watched this episode, not only the visuals of the creature were terrifying, but the idea that they could become one as well was downright horrifying. Being that the creature was unknown before this appearance, many assumed it to be an original creature for the show, but as it turned out, that wasn't quite the case. Namaki Shinichiro, a paranormal researcher, contacted the show and discovered that the creature wasn't an original creation, but rather a story from the producer's hometown. They were unable to dig up any further information than that, however, so in the end, the truth behind it remains a mystery. There were also rumours that a man was once seen riding around a city on a bicycle covered in toilet paper, and as he chased children near a kindergarten, he screamed, "You don't have to run!" He fled the scene once local residents noticed him, but the incident, if it indeed did take place, no doubt left a strong and terrifying impression on the children being chased by this man resembling a mummy on a bike. Was that the inspiration for the story, or was it entirely unrelated? As is the case with many urban legends, we're unlikely to ever know. Either way, in the years since its first appearance, Tonkaraton has appeared in all sorts of media and is especially popular with children. And now, if you ever run into a creature covered in bandages and singing "Ton, Ton, Tonkaraton," you know just what to do to avoid becoming one yourself. But what did you guys think of this one? Do you have any similar tales from your own hometowns? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you again next time. This week's yokai comes to us from Hokkaido, although it has apparently been spotted in other snowy regions as well. This creepy creature is said to be completely invisible and harmless to adults, but sadly, the same can't be said for children. This yokai is known as Shibare Bokko, and if you hear banging on the front door late one snowy night, beware. This creature isn't so widely known, and little information can be found on it. What little we have apparently comes from yokai researchers from the north of Japan, where Shibare Bokko supposedly resides. Its name comes from the local dialect, with shibareru meaning cold, and bokko meaning little stick. Put together, it therefore means cold, small stick. A strange name, right? But the bokko part can also mean child, so a cold child. Now it makes a little more sense and gives you some idea of what to expect. According to the stories, Shibare Bokko appears late on snowy nights when people are presumably sleeping in their nice warm beds. Suddenly, a strange, creepy voice can be heard coming from outside the house, which some have described as sounding somewhat like a bell ringing. It's then followed by rapid banging on the front door. Considering that it's late at night in the middle of winter, who on earth could be knocking at this time? Now, normally, if someone is knocking on your door late at night, an adult would get up to answer it, right? If one of the adults in the house gets up and answers to see what all the knocking is about, strangely, they'll be greeted with nothing but snow. Nobody's there, the banging has stopped, and the voice is gone. How odd. Maybe it was a wild animal or something trying to get in out of the snow. You can try to explain it away however you like, but in the end, nothing is there. You go back to bed. However, if a child gets up to answer the door instead, well, something much different will happen. If a child answers the door instead, they'll be snatched up by this yokai and spirited away into the snow. The next day, their frozen, lifeless body will be found in the snow, having become the latest victim of Shibare Bokko. When the body is discovered, however, you can apparently hear the yokai mutter something that doesn't make much sense. Nemumi Saki Dero, it repeats several times, and then it's gone. What does this mean? Nobody knows. The Misaki part is believed to mean osaki, a word used in phrases to mean that somebody is going or leaving ahead of someone else. In this case, the child has moved on before their family. As for the rest of it, well, this remains a mystery. The strange muttering and the fact that the yokai only takes children has led some to believe that perhaps Shibare Bokko is a messenger or servant for something bigger, perhaps a kami-sama. But much remains unknown about the creature and why it only targets children. Because children are the only ones able to see this creature, and if they do, they die promptly thereafter, nobody is quite sure what exactly it looks like. There are theories that it could be related to Yuki-onna, or even Yukinko, which are snow spirits said to resemble children, or in some legends, said to literally be the children of Yuki-onna herself. The Shibare Bokko seems to be far more deadly than the Yukinko, however, so if they are related, this one is certainly a more dangerous version. There are also theories that, because of its name, Shibare Bokko appears in the cold holding what looks like a broken piece of wood, and with that, it sings to lure children outside before killing them with it, leaving their bodies in the snow for their unfortunate families to find. Either way, the things that remain certain about this creature is that it appears late on snowy nights, and only children can see it. If they are unlucky enough to be the ones to open the door to its knocking, then they will be spirited away. Therefore, the only way to deal with it is to make sure an adult is the one who opens the door instead. Considering the nature of this yokai, it appears to exist as a warning to children, a lesson, if you will, to be both well-behaved and careful. Parents up north apparently sometimes use the creature to frighten their children into bed. If you stay up late, then Shibare Bokko will get you. It's the local version of the boogeyman, if you will, and if you don't go to bed and stay there, then you'll be kidnapped and freeze to death in the snow outside. Maybe it's best to listen to them regardless of whether the creature is real or not. And that is Shibare Bokko, a mysterious yokai from Japan's northern regions that is said to spirit away children if they're unlucky enough to answer its call late on snowy nights. What did you guys think of this one? Do you have any similar stories from your own country? Let me know in the comments below and I'll see you again next time.